The gospel and the first reading both speak a powerful question to us through the two widows' stories. Where do we place our security is the question. Where do we place our security? Is it in money as a security base for our life, or is it in God, the creator of heaven and earth? Let's look at money for a moment. Talking about money is one of the biggest and greatest taboos around, I think. It's more a taboo than sex, religion, or politics. But why is this? Consider the importance of money and how it is tied up with our relationships, our families, our lifestyles, our day-to-day living. And we have conversations about it rarely. Are the conversations then about money anxious, angry, hopeful, satisfied? How do we spend our money then? Where we spend and give it indicates what we find most important in life. Do we like to spend our money then on friends, charities, churches, political parties, educational institutions? If money touches our relationships with family members and the world beyond the home, then it also reaches into our inner life as well. How does having or not having money affect our self-esteem or sense of comfort in life? If any of these questions makes us even a little uncomfortable, then it is because talking about money is a taboo. The reason for that taboo is that money has something to do with that intimate place in our heart where we desire security. And we do not want to reveal our need or give away our security to someone who may betray us. Many voices around us and within us warn us of the danger of dependence. We fear being dependent on others because that dependence appears as a threat to our security. We fear being dependent on others, and one voice we might say then is, you must be self-sufficient. And one voice I think also says, as long as you have money in the bank, nothing bad can really happen to you. The pressure in our culture to secure our own future and to control our lives as much as possible does not find support in the Bible. Jesus knows our need for security. He's the designer of the human heart. He is concerned that we do not place our trust in money or things or people who cannot offer us true security. He can and he does. He says, do not store up treasure for yourselves on earth, where moth and worm destroy, and thieves can break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, for wherever your treasure is, there will your heart be too. We cannot find security if our heart then is divided. You cannot serve both God and money. So what is our security base? Let us look at the two widows who were mentioned as examples. In 1 Kings, in our first reading, it mentions a Gentile woman who was gathering sticks in order to build a fire to cook her last meal for her son and her son. All that she had was in the flour and the oil to be used for their last meal. That was their entire livelihood right there, or security base. Elijah called out to her for hospitality. Very timely, right? She was afraid for her own life that this act of generosity demanded upon her by hospitality and demanding also faith would result in her death and her son's. But Elijah says, do not be afraid. God will allow you to live, but show a small act of generosity to the servant of God, who Elijah really was as a prophet. Then, when she did this, when she followed through on this, she was able to eat for a year with Elijah and her son as well. The jar of flour did not go empty, nor the jug of oil run dry, as the Lord had foretold through Elijah. Now, the other widow is found in the gospel. Imagine the temple area now for a moment in Jerusalem. People coming and going from all over, giving offerings and tithes to the temple treasury. There were 13 different boxes, in fact, that they could give to different things. Jesus sits opposite the treasury, begins observing those offering their money to God. The temple was the place of God's presence as a reminder, for all of Israel had to go to Jerusalem to be near his presence. And here comes a widow. She has no one to provide for her, for the men had the jobs and the women kept the home. The woman also had lost the one she loved. The person that she loved had died. She came and put in 2 small coins. That's all she had. Upon this, Jesus, being divine and full of knowledge of each person, knew that she had given her living and income, all of it. Jesus sees in this act of the widow a principle so fundamental to following him that he calls his disciples to him and said, "Amen, I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the other contributors to the treasury, for they have all contributed from their surplus wealth. But she, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, for her whole livelihood was given." Jesus sees her heart. Do we think he doesn't see ours? Jesus sees our hearts. She put her security in God and not in the 2 small coins that she had. Jesus saw that the others, though by human standards gave much, she gave more. The widow gave the most in his eyes because of the faith with which she gave. She offered her coins as a way of trust and surrender to God as a security base for her life. These 2 widows give us 3 things to remember in giving. We have a choice to take it to heart, of course, thinking that, does God see our hearts or our minds? Real giving, first of all, the first lesson is real giving is sacrificial. It is. Kind of hurts a little bit. The amount of the gift never matters so much as its cost to the giver. Not the size of the gift, but the sacrifice. Let's not secure our comforts each month first and then give what's left over to God. There is the challenge. But give him those first fruits of our work, our regular checks that we receive, and watch what happens. The happiest people I know are the most generous, but then they're the ones also that secure this first. This convicts me as well to change my habits, and I will. I've already started today, actually. And when we receive these things, we should give the first to God and allow him then to work in all the other ways. That takes a sacrifice. Secondly, these stories teach us that real giving has a bit of a risk to it, doesn't it? There's a risk in love, even, too. These women could have kept their food, the oil and the flour. They could have kept those coins, hung on to them. It wouldn't have been much, but it would have been something, right? The tragedy is that there is often some part of our lives, some part of our activities, some part of ourselves, which we do not want to give to Christ, and we do not give it to him. Somehow we hold something back rather than make the final sacrifice and that surrender and trust in his providence. Thirdly, this teaches us a strange and amazing thing, that the person whom the New Testament and Jesus hand on to history as a pattern of generosity is a person who gave the gift of 1/128th of a daily wage. Pretty small, pretty small. We may not think we have much to offer to God. But if we give it, especially first, if we give all we have at his disposal then too, he can do things with it and with us that are beyond our imaginings. And he will take us on an adventure. And it will be beautiful. And it will be worth it all. And that reality, of course, we need grace and to pray for that. Lord, help me to put these things first. Let me put my whole livelihood at your disposal. Let me surrender it to you and trust in your divine providence. Let me abandon myself to your providence. Mary, our Immaculate Mother, perfect embodiment of faith, give us a heart like yours to be generous in saying yes to God.